Hey there, welcome to The Pulse. I'm Brian Crescenti, and I'm excited to be here today to talk to you about the current state and future evolution of video games. Joining me are Chump Squad's Gwen Frey, Ember Labs' Mike Greer, and Epic Games' Zach Parrish. So what are we going to be talking about today? The next-gen gaming revolution. Never has there been a more exciting time than right now to create video games and to play those creations. That's in part because of the mainstreamification of gaming. Where once gaming was a subculture, nowadays billions of people play games. New technology, new designs, new ways to access games have all helped to lower the barrier to entry for gaming. And improved game engines like the Unreal Engine means anyone can make a game, and those games have become increasingly diverse and eclectic. Streaming from anywhere without losing your place has also had a huge impact on gaming. What that means is now a game that once could only be played on an expensive high-end PC or on a game console can now be played on a low-end laptop or on a smartphone or on a tablet. And often you can move from one system to another without losing your place. In fact, you can even play with friends who are on different systems. Today, we're going to be talking about a lot of those things. We're going to be talking about the current state of this generation of gaming, including some of its biggest innovations. We're also going to be talking about how we define generational shifts at a time when innovation and new technologies seem to be coming by so quickly. The impact of things like cloud gaming and always-on gaming will also be something we discuss. And finally, we're going to be talking about what innovations are currently shaping the face of gaming today and how new big innovations and leaps in technology, like with the Unreal Engine, have helped to empower small studios. So to kick things off, I'd like to circle back to our three wonderful guests and give them each a chance to better introduce themselves. I'd like to start with Chump Squad's Gwen Frey, whose Kine is already out, and I know she's working on a new game called Lab Rat.
That's right. So my name's Gwen Frey. I've been in the industry for about 13 years now. I've worked in AAA briefly. I worked in MMOs. I co-founded an indie studio a couple years back called The Molasses Flood. Launched a title there. And then more recently, 2 years ago, I founded my own studio to develop my own personal work. And I launched Kine last year. And I run a micro studio here in Boston. Currently working on my second title, Lab Rat now, which is going to come out early next year.
Excellent. And next, actually, I guess moving left to right, maybe, is Epic Games' Zach Parrish.
Hey, how's it going? So I've been at Epic for about 8 years now. I have a background in tech art, and I also work on the business development side, handling engine licensing for a lot of different studios that are shipping games in Unreal Engine.
Excellent. And then finally, Ember Labs' Mike Greer. They're a studio that have done a lot of work in cinematics, and now they're working on Kena? I always forget how to pronounce it. Tell me how to pronounce it, Mike.
Kena, yeah. Let's get that out the way. It's Kena, yeah, like the South American flute. But yeah, right. My name's Mike Greer. I'm the chief creative here at Ember. Working on our first big game, which is Kena Bridge of Spirits. But we've done some smaller development in the past, and scheduled to release early next year and getting very close to the finish line. So we're all super excited.
Excellent. So before we sort of dive into the meat of the discussion, I just wanted to get a sense of what you all thought about this generation that we're in. I think the easiest way to figure that out is to ask you each, what is your favorite game of this generation? I don't know if one of you know one right off the top of your head, but what is the game that, like, in your mind, defines this generation?
Oh man, I mean, I've picked my favorites. Like I'm in the indie scene. I love what's coming out of the indie scene. I think Darkest Dungeon, some of the AAA, we call them AAA studios that are large for indies, but are making really highly polished, beautiful work at about the $25 price point. So those tend to be the games that I get really passionate about these days, more than AAA titles necessarily. So for me, I think it's actually Darkest Dungeon. It's on my mind because they're launching a sequel soon.
Mike, Zach?
Go ahead, Zach. You go first.
So for me, it's actually hard to narrow it down. I find myself kind of very much like Gwen, more and more inspired by how many smaller studios are cranking out these really high-powered games and how easy it seems to be for folks to just churn out experiences that I'm loving to play. Like I just finished Bloodstained. I got into that game a little late, but I've always been a Castlevania fan. And I've always been like, man, I really wish there was another Symphony of the Night out there. And I just hammered through Bloodstained, and I think on my fourth playthrough, I was like, okay, I think maybe I'm done with this. But that sort of thing where a group of creatives are like, hey, we want to churn this out. It would normally have taken a big studio and a whole bunch of backing, but they got it together on Kickstarter and delivered an amazing product. It's, to me, that is this generation.
Very cool.
Kickstarter might be what's defining this generation, actually, if you think about it.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, I agree. Do you have any thoughts, Mike? Have you decided settled on a game?
Totally agree with Zach and Gwen. The smaller experiences are kind of what I gravitate towards, mostly because I don't have as much time to play, the bigger games. But it's really great and inspiring as a smaller team ourselves to, see these other similar sized groups doing really awesome experiences. But I'm going to go the other route. I mean, Breath of the Wild, I'm not sure if that's like this generation because the Switch is sort of like its own thing. But that was a really inspiring experience. I just loved how, I remember when it came out, it was just like a thing that everyone was talking about, kind of the water cooler experience of it. And I'm a huge, Nintendo sort of fanboy, so.
I would have never guessed that one of the people behind the Majora's Mask fan film was a Nintendo fanboy.
Yeah.
Surprise. Is there like one thing when you think about this, the generation we're sort of in right now that defines that generation? What was the most impactful technology or, in the case of Kickstarter, maybe business model that sort of helped shape this generation?
Oh, man. We saw a new storefront with the Switch. That was pretty big. And that definitely brought indies onto the console in a way that we haven't seen in a long time. I mean, we obviously, when the Indie XBLA back in the day was huge for indies on the Xbox. But I don't think indies have been as successful since then for a while. I feel like we reached a point where there's just a lot of games on the Xbox. And so the launch of the Switch really, really brought some energy back into the smaller games that are smaller in scope, indie games. Indie games are doing really well on the Switch. But also, yes, absolutely. The Kickstarter and the idea that games are something you make with a community and that the games grow with that community and that you continue to develop games for a really long time is something that's huge this generation.
I remember, I'm not sure exactly what the year was, but when Double Fine was doing their first big one and it blew up, I remember like around the studio, we were all just like, how big is it going to get? How much are they going to raise? And it was really exciting because that hadn't really been a thing, at that scale before. And then there was like a huge wave that followed and a lot of great games came from that, like Broken Age and then they did a couple of sequels on Kickstarter and they all just one after another just kept upping and then the community started growing and growing. But yeah, early access too. I mean, Dead Cells was a big fan, like one of my favorite games in recent years. And I've been playing that since it came out in early access and just watching that community grow and, the fan base grow. It's pretty cool.
It's been interesting how early access has changed, at least in my case, the way that I look at games, the way I experience them, because I know when the early access, like in the dawn of that time frame, I kind of rebelled against it. I was like, you're launching a game that's not done. You're showing me parts that are broken. Why is this happening? And I didn't like it at first. Now that so many games have kind of taken that turn and like over the course of like, in some cases, a few months, in some cases, multiple years, like you take that initial jump of like, here's what I bought when I bought into early access. And now here's where we are. And it's so much better. It's such an interesting world now where we as players can kind of go along with that development experience and guide it in a lot of ways, because a lot of these smaller devs especially are really taking in feedback from their players during the EA period. And it's so exciting to see that happen.
I am curious, do you think that we're gonna stop talking about generational shifts in gaming, that like that's not really a thing anymore?
I don't think it's going to go away completely. I think it's going to be a little bit different. I think what Microsoft is doing with their different tiered consoles, we might see more of that. But I think the tentpole sort of next generational stuff is something that the community kind of rallies behind and enjoys. And they sort of want that, that leap with the console sort of version. It's a little harder to, manufacture and get all the developers sort of like up to speed if it's changing very, very rapidly on the console front, because there is that certification process. There is that sort of, checks and balances. So I don't know, I could be wrong, but I don't see that changing a whole lot on the console front. There might be smaller up. We even have, the PlayStation base and we have the Pro that happened in this generation. Right. So I can see more stuff like that happening, but these big sort of tentpole, it's the new one. I don't think that that's going to go away.
I'm personally not as excited about this next console generation because what it does is things that are already on PC for the most part, that a high-end PC will match. And I think we've reached a point where even if there was some incredible innovation, some cool new hardcore tech that was just existed on, say, the PS5. Say the PS5 had some exciting, awesome thing. The only people that would take advantage of that are the studios that are owned by Sony. Because if you're if you're third party, if you work for Activision or EA, you can't make something that's only going to be on one console that limits your market for no reason.
Right.
You need to make something that'll be a cross-platform anyways. And so what's been happening, what we've seen is that because everybody that's third party, which is where the majority of the content comes from, is going to make their stuff work on every platform, you're going to get the same game that's on the other platforms anyway. Nobody's going to make something custom for your hardware unless you pay them to.
All right, Zach, you have to take the middle ground. we have one on both sides. No.
Yeah, no, but the middle ground is really easy to take here, only in that, like with tools such as the Unreal Engine, you have folks that are putting together an off-the-shelf engine that is already going to handle a lot of the things that may be specific to a given platform. The hope is that the developer doesn't have to worry about that as much. In some cases, sure, there may be something way down in the core of the tech that becomes prohibitive if you're going to go across platform. We certainly saw that with a few things on PlayStation and PS4. But jumping back the other way, like in terms of generations, I think that is going to start mattering less and less. I think it still does. We're still in that spot where, just like the last 2 or 3 generations, every generation of consoles is really all about trying to catch up to what the PC has already been providing. But I know what I spent on my gaming PC. And even as they continue to raise the cost of these consoles, it's still significantly less than what I blew to get a really good gaming PC. So it's great that it's getting that kind of power out to a lot more people. I do still see some sort of promise in a future where we're all just kind of logging into some sort of gaming streaming service, and the high-powered computer is completely virtual, and a lot of this stuff matters. And I think once we get to that stage, and I have no idea how long that's going to be. It could be soon. It could be several years out from now. But once we get to that point, I think the discussion over generations really will disappear, because all of that stuff is just going to get upgraded virtually, and it's just a question of what your bandwidth.
Yeah, I agree with Zach. I think that once we get there, the need for console generations does start to fade. And then the real question is just when. Like when, I don't think we've kind of settled on that date, and everyone sort of has an opinion of when that can happen. But, maybe it will happen sooner than later. These things tend to happen quickly sometimes. At least because we're so close to a console launch, there's still a lot of, hype around, these new consoles coming out, and the community is getting excited. And it does, because they are subsidized, it does bring a lot of people who couldn't afford these, higher end PCs, these games are now available to them. So that's the sort of beauty of what consoles bring. But I don't know, the future is kind of weird in the technology front. Who knows what's going to change? But I'm excited about this generation, just because it might be the last one, like everyone's saying.
Yeah. Looking at the consoles, we've got, I guess you could say 4 consoles, 2 from each Microsoft and Sony coming out. When you look at sort of the tech that they are offering, are there things about that tech that excite you? As strange as it is to hear, I've downplayed it a little online, but I am actually excited about how fast the SSD is going to be on those, how fast it'll load games, because I am so impatient when it comes to waiting, and the fact that you can quickly go back into games. So for me, that's like the big thing, but I'd love to hear what you guys think. What are you looking most forward to?
I'm right there with you. For me, it's all about the I/O speeds we're starting to see in this new generation. But that's for a lot of reasons. One, because also I hate loading times just like you do. But I also work with a lot of developers who are always concerned about that and different ways that they can resculpt their content or adjust their gameplay or find little tips and tricks and smoke and mirrors in order to get rid of loading times. That being able to just have a lot of horsepower in the consoles so that you can get your game out without maybe having to rely quite so heavily on that sort of smoke and mirrors and special level design that just allows you to load this next section. Like, I think a lot of that is going to help out.
Yeah, the speed, the loading speed, and like Zach is saying, I think the throughput on those new hard drives is just it does definitely change the experience. And when you're playing, I'm kind of spoiled because I've been developing on the PS5 for a while now, And, when you're on the kit and you're, working on your game, everything is a lot smoother because the loading speed is just, it's really impressive how fast it is. And I think it does change the experience because when you go back, even on our SSDs on our local machines, it's a bit slower. I think that we're spoiled by our phones. I think, when we tap on an app and it just loads up, we're used to that sort of immediacy. So bringing that to the console front and on these, high-end games is really exciting.
Yeah,
Gwen?
it's hard to pitch that to consumers too. It's hard to explain that because it doesn't show well in a video on Twitter. You can't be like, the loading screens are shorter, see? Like, it isn't cool to show on Twitter or something like that. It's just one of those things where it doesn't feel good that things are loading faster, but once you go back, it feels bad that things used to load so long, It's one of those things that people are just going to take for granted when it's out there and people are used to it. So it's difficult to get hyped about it,
It's
it's
visual
hard
effects. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, I was just saying, I remember when we first were demoing some of the loading, it was a little off-putting because you were used to loading the game and then waiting for the screen and sort of having that breath. And then it would, the game would eventually load, but it just kind of snapped into it. And it was like, whoa, that's just not what I'm used to. And it just took a little bit of time to get sort of reacclimated to that sort of speed.
No more getting a sandwich while the game's loading. I mean, I remember there used to be loading screens that would say, go do something, which is crazy if you think about it.
I remember Mass Effect being this fantastic gem of a game. And then I went back and I was walking around the Citadel and those, in the 15-second elevator ride minimum, or these massive loading hallways that have nothing in them. Or I have so many stories of things on BioShock Infinite, at one point, we just couldn't have the world be seamless for part of the game. And so what we did was at the last minute, we realized we needed to stream out half of this level and then stream in the other half. And so we put what's a big, heavy door in the middle of the level so that, and the player would have to go up and interact with the door, and it would play this looping animation of lifting that door, and Booker and Liz would just have a conversation, and it was the silliest thing in the world, just to give us an excuse so that we could load out everything behind you, move you forward, slam the door shut so you can't see anything behind you, and then keep you going, just because that's what we had to do at the time, right? There's so many hacks and things that are just gross that you do to make a game work on the console. And it's just always fun when a new generation comes and makes a lot of that go away. But we will immediately fill that with content and then end up finding that we have to put in new hacks again. So
that's the thing about raising the ceiling, right? You hit it immediately and it's well, okay, now we have a really long loading time on the very latest hardware because we're trying to move in 88 gigs of some sort of content. So.
Of course, content is like a gas. It'll take up all available space.
So we've been talking about next-gen game development and next-gen games, but we haven't really had a chance to talk specifically about the games that Mike and Gwen are working on. Gwen, my understanding is that Lab Rat in some way is a bit about your experience in quarantine. I'd love to hear a little bit more about that.
So I didn't intend to make another puzzle game, actually. This kind of came up because March hit and I was stuck at home and I had this feeling that I was, I had this feeling that I was just stuck here and the only way I communicate with other people is through these two monitors in front of me. And I wanted to capture that feeling. And I wanted to capture that feeling. I wanted to encapsulate what it felt like to be in this moment right now. But I also really wanted to put something else out into the world that would make people laugh, that would make people smile. I didn't want to make this such a dark thing because it is absurd in a way that we are all in this experience. We have this shared experience that we're going through right now, but we're all also going through it. And so, Lab Rat is going to be it's a narrative puzzle game. There's this AI that's using machine learning to try to generate a puzzle game to keep you entertained. But you're not allowed to leave this little space that you're in. And so you're like a little rat in a Skinner box doing puzzles. And the AI is trying very hard to entertain you, but you're trapped there. And while you're playing through, you can see how other people are performing on the puzzles. And you can communicate with other people, but only through doing surveys where your only responses are the ones that the AI and the machine learning algorithms have dictated that you're allowed to respond with. And so and it's all real. You're communicating with other real players who are also going through the exact same experience. And you can see how many other people are playing the exact same puzzle you're playing while you're playing it. You can see on the monitors in the game world what's going on here.
Well, do you have a sense of when it might be coming out? How far away are we from seeing it?
I said I would work on it until COVID ended, but I think that's just a little bit too dark. So I'm gonna work on it until I'm probably gonna launch early next year or somewhere spring next year or so. I plan to have a closed beta. Probably I don't want to say exactly when, but I'm targeting December right now.
Okay, very cool.
So people can sign up for the beta at labrat.study.
Excellent. And Mike, you're working on Kena. I think I got the name right.
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
You got it. Yeah.
I've heard a little bit about it. I think there's a lot of excitement about it. It looks beautiful. Can you tell me a little bit about what the game is, how it works?
Yeah, so it's called Kena, Bridge of Spirits, and it's a throwback to sort of these old school action adventure games that I grew up with and love. It has a pretty unique core mechanic that revolves around collecting these little cute, fuzzy black creatures that are called the Rot. And with them, you play as Kena and you sort of battle these entities that are stuck, struggling with their, lingering past sort of ailments. The core loop of the game is that you discover these spirits, you learn about them, you kind of figure out why they're struggling, why they're stuck here, and then you figure out ways to kind of help them move on. But it has the very cute front end with the creatures and the lovable characters, but then it has some darker themes of redemption and sort of darker sort of emotional themes that the spirits are going through. So, we're targeting sort of a very polished, shorter experience, and hopefully we can release the game early next year, Q1.
Excellent. And it's coming to PS4, PS5, and PC, is that correct?
Yeah, PS4, PS5, and Epic Games Store on PC, yeah.
Oh, wonderful. Fantastic. So I'd love to talk about visual fidelity. It's funny, you think back not too long ago, and the big debate was about the uncanny valley, and, will we ever be able to make someone look like a human being? And, I don't know if we're 100% there yet, but we've gotten much closer than I think, or you guys have gotten much closer than in the past. Unreal Engine 5 had this amazing demo that I think blew everybody away. Zach, I'm curious what you think about when it comes to sort of realism in video games, and also I guess it's not just about realism, but also about being able to stylize your games in different ways. What do you think the new engine is going to do for people in that sense?
Well, I think the tech demo we put out did a really good job of showcasing, some of the new hotness in terms of graphics, right? Being able to use Nanite to put out meshes that are just millions and millions of polygons to populate a world and make it feel very dense. Lighting has always been a thing. Anybody who's ever tried to make a game or even just a small experience in a 3D engine knows that setting up realistic lighting is always a huge hurdle. So things like Lumen are definitely going to help. But I think the real benefit to those technologies isn't that it's just going to add more of the pretty. I think every generation we see something that's like, oh, well, now we can ray trace, or now we can do this other great thing. I mean, I remember when normal maps were like super awesome right around the time it was going to be Doom 3, but then I think the first one I played was the Chronicles of Riddick game. And I was like, oh my God, it looks like there's so many little like screws and bolts and nuts in the walls and everything because of normal mapping. And every generation has that big epochal moment. But I think what's really going to drive things in terms of the new tech is how much more the engine, in this case UE5, is going to start doing some of that work for the developer. Like you look at Nanite, right? So yeah, we show that off with having millions and millions of polys, but what's actually happening there is the developer was able to take their high resolution thing they put together in ZBrush and essentially just drop that right into a game without all these other steps of like, okay, now I'm gonna make a low res version of it. Now I'm gonna bake out my normal map and all this other stuff, and all these different steps which become prohibitive unless you have a team, an army of artists to help get all that done. So the upshot becomes that smaller teams can start delivering high quality visuals if that's what they're targeting. But at the same time, we're striving to keep the engine flexible. If you want to write your own shaders and have a game that is super stylized and has a really different look, you can do that too. It's just opening up those doors in such a way that you don't have to have a giant cadre of developers just to get your idea out the door.
Mike, how did that, you guys obviously have experience, I know you've worked on other games, but a lot of your experience has been on the cinematic side. When you're kind of moving over to the game development side, how has this helped you to sort of realize your vision?
Well, I think UE4 even, Zach was talking about UE5, but I think UE4 even for us enabled a lot of cool things to happen on the cinematic front with the sequencer and, just sort of the workflow of getting our animations into the engine and streamlining that process. It's kind of already in a pretty good spot. But, I think even with UE4, we're having to cheat a lot of sort of our setups. We can't throw in our full res models. We have to do a lot of, lighting sort of tricks to kind of simulate, GI and things on that front to make the experience feel rich. So I'm excited for the next generation of Unreal, just because I think that, the tools that Zach presented in terms of like just making the process even more streamlined to help get us, up to where we want to from a visual perspective quickly. And then from there, it's more about the iteration and experimenting on what the look of the game is going to be. But UE4 even opened a lot of opportunities for us. Just sort of the barrier to entry, I feel like in UE4 is pretty low comparatively to a lot of older generations of gaming.
Gwen, are you in your latest game? Are you still essentially a one-person studio, or are you working with a lot of freelancers?
I'm the only full-time person. I did start this out collaborating with one other developer. He's working part-time because he's got a part-time job, and he's somebody I'm collaborating with. And I have hired a couple of contractors for like some hourly work here and there for things like audio, for instance. But mostly, I am still a micro studio.
Does it make it easier for you to operate with a very low headcount? Does that like make it? Are the tools helping that process?
I mean, it makes it possible, right? Part of this is going to turn to is this supposed to be a commercial for Unreal? We're getting there. But yeah, like
I'm okay with that, actually.
Yeah. I am one person and I launched a game on every console and on Google Stadia, which is a brand new console. And I did it.
Right.
I couldn't have done something like that without any engineers. I'm not a programmer. I don't have a programmer background. I wrote this game using Blueprint scripting, which is a visual scripting language in the Unreal Engine. And I could only do what I did because the Unreal Engine exists, because it's already set up to target all these different platforms. And it lets me just focus on making the game rather than figuring out like all the things you do to draw a triangle on a screen. And I think this is normal. As time goes on, two things happen. People who are on the bleeding edge, who are programmers, who are really into technology and so forth, they will reach higher than they ever have. Every year they reach a little bit further. They reach towards something in every field, motion, matching, whatever the new sexy thing is in animation and graphics and everything is always reaching a little bit further. But at the same time, the barrier for entry for things that have already been figured out goes up too. And so you see more and more people every year capable of putting out high quality things that they weren't able to do anymore. And it does become like a treadmill after a while if you're a developer, because you're either like, you're always having to keep up with the new technology. Like I'm dreading UE5. I have to learn another engine again. Thanks, Zach. Like I was finally got this one like completely figured out. You couldn't just stop for a year, but like this.
If it makes you feel any better, I'm in the exact same boat. So there you go.
Yeah, you gotta just put something in the water at Epic, slow those guys down. But yeah, it's exciting when things move forward. And yes, I could not have launched Kine if the Unreal Engine didn't exist. And I'm really dreading / excited to see what UE5 offers.
I'm more excited. I don't know. I'm so pumped for UE5. I don't know why. I think, but to your point, we're like really getting comfortable with UE4. Like the whole studio is like familiar with it. We have our pipelines and everything. Hopefully Zach doesn't screw us up too much, but yeah. I'm just really hyped on this.
I will do my best. Yeah, I will do my best not to screw this up. The good news is that, UE5 is going to be an update for sure, but you're still going to know you're using Unreal. So it's not going to be like landing on an alien planet.
It's interesting. There's been a lot of talk kind of leading up to this generation by the platform holders about lowering barriers to entry for people who want to play games all around the world. But what hasn't been talked about as much is the same thing's happening for people who want to make games around the world. Like, to your point, Gwen, you don't have to be an engineer or have an engineer on your team to make a game now. And I think coupled with the fact that the experiences you can create can be so high end, I think it's a really powerful thing. Like the idea that perhaps you can really create the thing that's in your head and make it look exactly like you want it to, I think is amazing.
Oh, you're seeing it across the board too. Not just in, so we tend to think as game developers, so we tend to think about our engines, but you're also just seeing people being able to create things in things like Dreams.
Right.
You're seeing people able to, in a way before that you had to be a programmer in order to really express yourself in this kind of medium. Now you can express yourself in so many different ways in this medium, and I think it's just beautiful.
Yeah, across the board, creatively, the barrier to entry is just like exponentially been lowered. You know, I remember when I first started off in 3D and like teaching myself how to animate and things like that. It was like in Maya 2, and it was just like, it was like, you know, trying to move a house by yourself, trying to learn this technology and having enough hardware power to kind of get these things working and get the renders out that you wanted to. But now there's just so many great tools for any creators of all sorts. And, you know, totally agree. UE4 sort of opened the marketplace in terms of becoming accessible and free to everyone. That was a big change that happened, you know, not that long ago. And I think, you know, the barrier to entry from people who want to make games is relatively low. There's a lot of great resources, educational resources online to kind of get in there and start making things move and getting your vision on screen pretty quickly. It's a cool time to be making games.
I do feel obligated, though, to throw a quick thing out to all of my engineer programmer friends out there.
Nothing against programmers or engineers.
No, you do still really need them, because while the barrier for entry for getting a game done with amazing tools like Blueprint, I mean, it really has made it where folks like me, I'm not a programmer. I checked in code once at Epic and got really yelled at for it. But now you can make games with tools like Blueprint. At the same time, that's a maybe exponential shift in terms of how much you can get done, or how much that barrier for entry has opened up for more developers. But if you're an engineer and you understand the Unreal code base and what is already there and what you can leverage or build on top of, it's orders of magnitude more power. And you can start doing things that we never designed the Unreal Engine to be able to do in the first place, by kind of like stand on the shoulders of that tech and build something truly remarkable that people will always look at.
So Zach, if somebody is on UE4 and wants to migrate their project over to UE5, how hard is that?
Well, so I get this question a lot lately. If you're targeting getting your game out the door anytime near the launch window of UE5, you're probably already building it on UE4. So a lot of developers care about this. There's like the short, easy answer, and then there's the slightly more technical answer. The short, easy answer is, yes, you can totally do it and it won't be terribly painful. The more technical answer is, it kind of depends on a few things. Internally, we're looking at Unreal Engine 5 kind of like 4 versions of UE4 ahead. So right now, like as an example, we're on Unreal Engine 4.26. So you could kind of think of Unreal Engine 5 like Unreal Engine 4.30. Now, if anybody watching is an engineer, if they've ever done like an integration, they can kind of get sort of a general idea of how much work it might be to integrate a new version of the engine that was 4 steps ahead. So that helps a little bit. But to keep it kind of light, if you haven't been making vast changes to the engine in your project, it should be fairly straightforward.
Excellent. So I want to talk, we talked a little bit about cloud streaming, but the thing that is near and dear to my heart is connected experiences. You know, obviously Fortnite, Rocket League, Call of Duty, Overwatch, they're all incredibly connected games. Some of those titles, I think, Fortnite is a great example, and I kind of reference this in the intro, is sort of a metaverse. This thing that, you know, people wrote about and said was going to come in the far future. And yeah, we're not there yet, but it's still amazing what happens in these connected experiences. Do you feel that that's now the status quo, that the games have to be? I think, I may be wrong, but I think that Mike and Gwen, neither of your games are connected, so maybe I shouldn't be saying that. But like, what do you think about that?
I mean, I think it's cool. I think the connected sort of experiences that you get from gaming are uniquely sort of a part of the culture of the gaming community, and I don't think every game needs to be that. I don't think there's enough room for every game to be that. But I think it's something that's been growing, and it's a really cool thing to see, especially with Fortnite, like how that shift sort of went from, you know, this one experience to the next, to the next, and it became bigger and bigger over time. I think it's cool, but I don't think it's, I mean, I'm kind of biased because we're making a single player sort of story-driven experience, so it's 180 from that. But I think that, you know, there's enough room in the marketplace for both experiences, for sure.
I don't think it's going to be a status quo, because kind of like dovetailing into what Mike was saying, I don't think it's right for every experience out there. There will definitely be cases where you will just want to go off and experience some universe on your own through single player gaming or even just co-op gaming. But like, I know that at least in the Fortnite world, like I love playing Fortnite, and I'm really, really remarkably bad at it. But as soon as we started with the whole party royale scene, that's been absolutely amazing. Like going in there and just like watching concerts and watching people react to that in this sort of metaversey space has been really fascinating. But I don't think that's going to become the answer to all games at this point. There's a future where that's where it starts, right? Where it does kind of have that sort of traditional sci-fi metaverse feel, where you start off in an experience like that, and then you navigate to the single player game you want to play entirely in that space. And when you're done, you go back out to what we think of now as the home screen of your console, but it's actually its own kind of metaverse experience in and of itself. Maybe we'll get there, but in terms of the games themselves, I don't think that's going to be like an accepted status quo that everybody has to have.
When you think about sort of the future of gaming, what are your hopes? Are there big things that you want to see happen in the next generation or next few generations that hasn't happened yet?
Well, I'll jump in. For me personally, I've been really excited by the last couple of generations in the growth of the indie scene. And I just want to see that continue to expand. I want that high school student right now who's been like, oh, I've got this great idea for a game, to shift over from the idea person to the execution person. I want the tools to make it easier to do that. I want the education stuff to be out there, like go get on YouTube or a tutorial site, learn what you need to learn. I want it not to be overwhelming. I want scripting languages to get even more visual than Blueprint and easier to understand, so that people can start getting their more complicated ideas out. Because for me, gaming really started to lift off this last decade or so as smaller groups who could take bigger risks started churning out more interesting ideas, because they don't have to swing for the trees with every game release, right? Like they can be like, oh, I got this weird idea where maybe you're a hamburger trying to get yourself eaten at a fast food joint, where like, your big studios can't possibly make that game, but your two team, folks, two people maybe in college are like, yeah, we could knock that out this weekend, and then I get to play it. That's what I love. Is just this hard hitting, rapid experience is flying out.
Mike or
yeah, I kind of agree. I think the diversity in sort of the types of games we can play is always fun, to just have new experiences that you didn't think of as a game, or like that they were even possible. And I think Zach's right on point there, saying that the tools and enabling people to create and have fun creating is everything. I think I don't see that stopping. I think it's only going to get even more as things become more and more accessible. I think we're going to see that clip of unique experiences and sort of unique takes on games become faster, and that's really exciting to me, especially because you're going to have more horsepower to play with as a developer as well. I just want to see that continue to grow alongside the AAA sort of eye candy stuff that we're going to get for sure, and that just comes along with the the nature of having more power in these bigger developers' hands. Right. So yeah, I just love the fact that both of those things exist, and that the whole the gaming community is so diverse right now. I just want to see that continue to grow.
Yeah, I mean, I feel the same way. I'm not as excited by the eye candy, right? Like I'm way more excited by the I want to be surprised and delighted by something that I didn't expect. I want to play that game about the hamburger.
Oh, no.
I'm in the exact same boat.
I know that I'm agreeing with what everybody just said, but I'm sort of in the same boat as well. Like, I think that, you look at some of the titles, Deadliest Dungeon is like a great example of that. I mean, that's essentially, did I say that right? I feel like I got the name wrong.
Darkest Dungeon.
I knew it. It was very deadly for me, though.
Yeah.
But like, that's a game about PTSD. That's an amazing game that deals with topics that you never see dealt with in a really clever, artful way. And that's what I want to see. I want to see games that will tackle subjects that maybe big studios won't tackle, or games that come from places that we don't usually see games coming from. I mean, this past generation, we've seen a couple of games come from Cuba, which is something like very unexpected. And I'd love to see more games from all over the world, because then we get to see some perspectives that maybe we're not used to seeing, and see some of these cultures examined. One thing I personally also would love to see, though, is some way of curating those experiences. I think it's a big challenge that we first saw sort of crop up with the iPhone, and now we're starting to see crop up with PC games, where it's like, there's too many games. There's too many good things.
There are. But I mean, that's a side effect of the alternative is you have a walled garden, right? Like the alternative is you have to impress some tech bro at some major tech company to get your game in, which is historically what we've had for a lot of this stuff. And that is exactly what keeps games. That is exactly what makes it so that people in Cuba or other places that don't know, they don't have the connections, even if they have a good game, they can't launch it because they don't know the right people. It's one of the things that it's cool that on PC you can put an executable up on a website and share your game with the world. And we can argue back and forth over which PC storefronts, how open they should be and how much they should allow, that sort of thing. But I mean, there's two ends of that spectrum, right?
Right. So I would be remiss if I did not bring up COVID and the impact it's had on everybody's work and play lives. But more sort of for this, I was just curious. I know that with smaller studios, actually, I suspect with smaller studios, maybe it's not as big an impact. But has the fact that people are now having to work remotely impacted the way you work or made you rethink things?
I don't think there's a way you can say no to that. I mean, of course it has, right?
Right.
It changes a lot of things. I mean, are you set up in a space at home where you can just focus? There's a huge boon to being able to leave the confines of your house and the day-to-day, whatever responsibilities you have, right? You might have kids, you might have pets, you might have a loved one who needs more attention or special needs of any kind. And the ability to kind of step away from all of that and get into a nice enclosed professional space to get your work done every day was actually huge. And I think we're starting to maybe see now for the first time how much of a benefit that is. Same time, being able to overcome that and find ways to work around it, and in some ways maybe force more of a work-life balance on people, has had its advantages as well. Would I have volunteered to go down this path? Absolutely not. But now that we're here, I think we're starting to see some really impressive outcomes of folks finding ways to collaborate in new and exciting manners, kind of ways to redefine what collaboration even means. Do you need to actually be sitting at my desk writing on a piece of paper while we hammer up, stuff out? Like, it's great if you can do that, but if not, what are the alternatives? Maybe it's a Zoom call. Maybe we get on a Google Doc and we're both deleting each other's text while we try to write out ideas. Like, whatever it takes. It's been inspiring to see teams that have really overcome this and pushed things out during this really weird time.
Yeah, I mean, necessity, what is it? Like, poetry is more beautiful because there's constraints. Yeah, necessity can push you as an artist and that sort of thing. That's definitely true. And it is equal parts. It's fun to overcome the challenges, but there are challenges, and it sucks what's going on in the world today, and it hurts, and it hits everybody differently. It means some studios can't grow or change. Like, it definitely changed my plans. I didn't plan to make another game as like a micro studio. I was kind of hoping to grow, but it's kind of not a good time to do that. It's definitely hitting everybody differently.
For me, it kind of came in two phases. The first one was just like, okay, how are we going to make this work? Like, how are we going to keep everyone, working together and sort of distroed across from their working from home? And once we got that sorted out, things were pretty smooth and it was working. And then, another hurdle that I didn't anticipate was just sort of the mental strain that the team was going through, unrelated to the development of the game. And I think it's to Zach's point of like just being home all the time, not getting that escape, not really being at quite as collaborative maybe as we were when we were all in the studio, when you could just go talk to someone. When you had a problem, now you have to, am I bothering them now? I'm going to Slack them. Am I going to interrupt their workflow? And I think that second wave of just sort of how long it's gone on is starting to, affect the team in a different way than originally the impact it had. So, it's all, we're overcoming it as a team, but it's just like another thing that you have to deal with development and sort of while trying to ship a game, just another thing to worry about.
So I think, along with everything that we've learned from COVID, of course, there's a lot of downsides to it. At the end of the day, it's helped us all learn more to be understanding of where our boundaries need to be, that work-life balance actually can exist. These are stressful times, but I see studios coming together and getting things done. I see people finding ways to collaborate and being more creative. I even see like tools improving, not just things like video conferencing, but folks actually going out of their way to find ways to make their DCC apps work, or their like things like 3D animation and whatnot, so that they can be more collaborative. All of this great creativity is coming out of this. And while, yes, at some point we're going to go back to something that is finger quotes norm, I think this is going to change us in a lot of positive ways as well as negative, in helping us be prepared for when something like this happens. How can we keep things moving? How can we continue to be there for each other? How can companies, support and help their developers to move forward and still churn out those great games? It's been a hard road, but I think there's been a lot of really good things that we've all taken from it as well.
Absolutely. So we've been talking all about game development. Some of you may have never made your own game, so I'd love to hear what the three of you might tell the audience members who haven't had a chance to create their own game and maybe want to. What's the best way to sort of get into game development right now?
I'll jump in. I think there's a lot of great resources online to just learn whatever aspect of game development interests you. Because there's a lot of different things that need to come together to make a game work. But I think the tools are all there with Unreal, and the knowledge base is kind of accessible with the internet at your fingertips. There's a lot of great resources on YouTube. People just like sharing their tips and tricks and sort of their knowledge base. There's no really reason to sort of be scared of it. Just get in there, start making things happen.
Yeah, I mean, you always start with what you want to make. And when you're starting out, the thing you'll want to make is, absurdly large and way out of your ability to do, even no matter how far the tools come. So take the thing you want to make and imagine the smallest version of it. What is the thing you really want to achieve with what you want to make? What is the thing that is unique? Why do you want to make this thing? And clutch that, and then find the easiest way to make that. And it could be that you prototype by making a board game, and that you eventually bring into an engine. It could be that you prototype by, if you're a puzzle designer, maybe you start with PuzzleScript, maybe you start with Twine if you're a narrative person, maybe you just start with a notebook. Don't push yourself necessarily. The Unreal Engine is fantastic, but start figuring out what it is you want to. Sorry, Zach.
That was good. That was good.
The Unreal Engine's fantastic. But, before, there's always a phase where you brainstorm and where you figure out what you want to make, and you start there. And then you worry about the how. The what question is always going to be far more difficult than the how question these days. There's so many resources online. Once you know what you want to make, figuring out how is achievable. But getting that what down and getting that to be really good, that's the thing that you really have to focus on. And that's the thing that'll trip you up early.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'd say also don't be afraid of failure too, because like to Gwen's point, even your idea is going to be, even if you think it's small, it's probably too big, and you'll get in there and you don't know what you don't know, and then you'll have to figure it out. But I think failure is a part of the process for sure, and just like learning from that and moving forward. So don't let that get you down. Just keep moving forward.
So I came into this from. Oh my God, I'm going to date myself. So in the very early 2000s, like 2001 and 2, I was actually teaching 3D animation, both at a brick and mortar and online. And I remember having these conversations with my students who were like, oh, I'm so happy to be here. I'm excited. I'm learning Maya. And I finally see how all this great Pixar stuff works, because that's what they would call it. But then they were always like, but when I go home, I don't have Maya anymore. So it's like whatever I can learn here, and then whatever I can take away from this, that's what I'm going to use to get a job. And I look back at that and then look at like where we are now, and it's just a whole different universe now. You have the tools, and it's not just Unreal. Unreal is fantastic, but every single piece of the content development chain is actually there in some free version, along with resources to help you learn it. And it is going to feel overwhelming. And that's like to Gwen and Mike's point both, like find that scope within yourself, find that one thing you want to do. And maybe that one thing, sure, everybody wants to make a game. Everybody's got that great idea for their next game that they really want to see happen. But maybe that first thing you do is just getting the main character of your game or some representation in the game and jumping around. Maybe like pick the small victories, and you have to eat the elephant one bite at a time. So identify what those little tiny bites are and build up slowly, and be okay and patient with yourself, because one, nobody is born knowing this stuff. Two, nobody gets it right the first time. That's why failure is important. And three, if you stick with it, you actually can be successful now in ways that simply weren't available not all that long ago. It's a really exciting time on that front.
On that note, I'd like to thank everybody for joining us. Thank you so much for watching The Pulse. We've been discussing video games, and thank you again to Gwen and Mike and Zach for joining us.